At this point, rather than ask for questions, what we usually do is ask for a big round of applause for our panelists. It's hard to say much at all in 7 minutes, and so they really do a good job in being able to stick to that format. In order to start, what we'll begin is with one question directed to all of the panelists. And since we started originally with Bill as a panelist, we'll start with Joel and ask all the panelists to respond to this one question and just take 1 minute to do so. And I'll just go ding if, you know. Okay, so, what?
At 61 seconds.
At 61 seconds, yes. So the question is, what do you think is the biggest spiritual failing of the American culture as a whole? And what is the one thing that would improve upon that failing? 60 seconds.
No problem.
Stand, please. Yeah, thank you.
I think the biggest failing is that, that we are exclusive rather than inclusive, that religions have a tendency to focus on the difference as opposed to the similarities. And based on what I heard here tonight, there seems to be a lot of similarities, and yet we always seem to be dragged in one direction or another. So I think that the individuals in our society, in our country, can be the catalyst to unite each other. We have such a polarization caused by media. They don't want us to be liking each other. They would rather that we be hating each other and pointing out our differences. So I think as individuals that we have to be the ones that stand up and be the uniting force for all of us.
Thank you. I'm going to ask that you hold your applause because that takes up precious seconds and that's all we've got. So we'll let you clap at the very end again. So Teji, 1 minute.
Well, you know, we all live in our cocoons, religious cocoons, and build our own walls, and we don't see what's outside it. We don't even have a peeking hole in there to see what is outside our own little religious cocoon. So once we break these walls, dogmatic walls, once we burst ourselves out of our cocoons, then we can see the oneness in all. And once we see the oneness in all, doesn't matter how we look from the outside, doesn't matter what we say, it matters how we embrace each other as one. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I have to tell you this. I'm Canadian, so I could have an out here, but that's not really appropriate. I think that the biggest spiritual failing to be found here in the United States is arrogance. And I think that arrogance comes from a skewed optimism, the sense that what happens here has to be right, and the fact that we're having trouble is just like what they say about failure sometimes, that if you get something wrong, what most of us do is just try harder the same thing. And I think sometimes that is what happens here, is that there's this arrogance that we must be right, and so we just keep pushing harder and harder, and that doesn't seem to work very well.
I would agree with what has been said and add that an observation within the recent past is that we have moved from a society that allows public demonstration of our religious and spiritual beliefs to a society that, in order to maintain our political correctness, we go behind closed doors for our religion and our spiritual practices, and we don't allow others to share with us the greatness and the grandness of theirs and our spiritual practices.
Thank you. Bill?
I would say I obviously agree with all that has been said here. I think a problem that we all face is kind of introversion, individualism. Again, that is sometimes touted as an American value to, you know, pull yourselves up, be a self-made person, and so on. Yet we need to realize that we are interconnected. The image I like is that of a prism. A prism is one light, and then it's diffused into all the colors of the rainbow spectrum. But we all belong to one race. Not the black race, or the white race, or the oriental race, but the human race.
Thank you. Teji, this one's for you. This is just for Teji. What is the purpose of the clothing in your religion? For instance, the collar and the turban.
See, in Sikhi, as I said, Sikh is just a learner, a student. There's a parallel between the theology, or what is in Guru Granth, and the traditions. At the olden times, during the Mughal era, only they could wear turbans. Nobody else could wear turbans. Only the nobles could wear turbans. So Guru Nanak defied all that. He defied the kings, the rulers there, and we started wearing turbans. And one more important part is that we don't cut our hair, because it is a self-defeating prophecy. We keep on cutting, it keeps on growing back. I know, you need Rogaine. But, so, this defeating policy is there, so we keep our hair the way it is uncut. And in order to keep it clean, we have a little comb in there, so we comb our hair quite often, and the turban to keep it nicely and neat. Thank you.
Thank you. This one is for Reverend Jane. What is the Unitarian Universalist belief that would distinguish it most from other religions? Why would a Protestant leave their faith, for instance, to embrace being a UU?
Well, if you are a Unitarian Universalist, you can be a Christian and still be in the same room and learning from people from different other perceptions of reality. So one of the good things about it is that our tolerance forces us to listen closely to what we say to each other and what we believe. So that is one of the reasons. And most of us have a rather wicked sense of humor, and we kind of enjoy being in the same room while that is going on as well.
Great, thank you very much. Cyndi, there are two questions here about the treatment prayer. May we hear a treatment? Thank you.
You did.
If you could break that down, maybe.
Absolutely. Affirmative prayer treatment is, rather than beseeching or asking, we are stating when I do a treatment, I state what I know to be the truth, the spiritual truth. And so it is done in 5 steps. The steps are the recognition of the oneness of God, spirit, divine mind. When we use whatever words we would like to use to remind us that there is only one. And in that unification of the oneness, we may use words such as I am one in, as, and of God. Then the realization of the truth is the 3rd step that allows us to see beyond what an appearance might be. It might be to simply speak the truth of health, of well-being, of financial good, and to know that as a spiritual truth for the individual rather than what might be an appearance of a physical or emotional disturbance. Then we have the 4th step of thanksgiving. We give thanks that it is already complete in the mind of God, for we know that in the divine there is no time or space, and so as it is known, it is complete. And the final step is to release, to let go, to allow it to manifest within my experience.
Thank you. Father Bill, there are 4 questions here on the same topic, so I think everybody wants to know. And this one is, I'll just read them all. What must happen to allow women to serve as priests? Do you think we'll see women or sisters become priests? Is Catholicism heading toward more inclusiveness of sexual diversity in the clergy? Can women nuns be pastors or bishops or the Pope? He gets 1 minute, but it's only really one question.
Okay.
Just one really long one.
As you all know, in the Catholic Church now, the clergy is male. In the sense of the ordained clergy, as I mentioned in my talk, the ordained clergy has 3 levels: deacons, priests, and bishops. We believe that in the early church, back in the 1st century, there were deaconesses, women who were deacons. We find proof for that in the scripture. Can church rule change that? I don't agree with that change, but that's part of our history. Women can certainly serve in very high positions in the church. Certainly religious women, as we call them, sisters or nuns, can be very influential in the life of the church, whether it's principals of schools or presidents of universities or the head of a Catholic hospital, whatever. As I said, because of the shortage of priests, many women can be now pastors. They're technically not called pastors, they'd be called an administrator. And again, that might be in parts of the country, even parts of Nevada, where there are small congregations like, say, in Ely, Elko, Tonopah, far from the major cities of Reno and Las Vegas. As far as the ordination of women, it is not yet allowed in the Catholic Church. I personally don't believe there's any reason it should not be allowed in the future. I believe that God calls all people, male and female, to service, and I would look forward to the day when that would be changed.
Thank you. This one is for Joel. How does the chanting in Buddhism work, and why does it work in daily life? And perhaps in answering your question, could you demonstrate, or would you be willing to chant?
Sure. The phrase Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is the name given to the universal law of cause and effect. Basically, that's what Nam-myoho Renge Kyo means. So basically, the premise is that everything is based on cause and effect. Our lives are the manifestation of all of the causes that we've made, which has led us to this present moment and leads us to every present moment that we have. Physically, it stimulates the highest condition that humans have, which we call Buddhahood, which is a level of consciousness that transcends any kind of suffering or ignorance. It awakens your mind to understand how all the causes that you have made and that other people have made that you're interacting with creates the moment. So it's kind of like water. I mean, you can describe water all day long, but if you're thirsty and you never drink it, then you never know how it refreshes you. So Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is the same way. It is an experience as opposed to a belief or a theory. So I will chant a little bit. You're welcome to join in. Don't expect any lightning bolts to hit you in the head or anything like that. Actually, you can practice Buddhism without being a Buddhist. So you can benefit from the effect of chanting or tapping into your highest life condition. So anyhow, I'll do it slowly a couple of times and then if you'd like to join it. So it's Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. 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 So you've just experienced your Buddha life condition.
Thank you. That was fun. It was. Okay, the next question is for Jane. What is the Unitarian position with regard to the relationship between the body and the spirit? Do we move on spiritually after this life as humans, or is all life over when we die?
Well, I don't know. There's about 2 or 3 million Unitarian Universalists in the world, and there's probably about 2 or 3 million answers to that question. In other words, we feel it's very important that each person decides for themselves where they stand. So the church does not have a specific position. It could go on, we could go on and on to talk about it, but there is no official, there is life after death, there is not life after death, there is reincarnation, there is this and that. It's respectfully looked at, and each person makes their own decision about that, and we certainly talk about it from time to time.
Thank you. This question is for Cyndi. This is a chance, I think, for you to define the difference between Christian Science and religious science, because the question is, there are many stories about Christian scientists refusing possible remedial health care. What do you say?
Oh. Okay, well, I say that we are not Christian Science. The relationship between Christian Science and religious science right at the moment has mostly to do with the name science in the word. In fact, the founder of religious science, Ernest Holmes, did study Christian Science and with the founders of Christian Science. And to specifically address that topic, we believe that in the oneness, in the allness, in the divine beingness, that God has provided an opportunity for physicians and chiropractors and massage therapists and dentists and scientists for us to develop as human beings the knowledge base that provides medical care and research and pharmaceuticals, and that we have the opportunity to utilize those while we are doing the spiritual work that will allow us to heal also.
Thank you. This question is for Father Bill. Can you please review the Catholic Church's stance on divorce? Is the parishioner able to take communion or other sacraments? How can the parishioner rejoin the church after divorce?
Okay, first of all, there's a misinformation on the very last question itself. A person is not excommunicated from the church because he or she is divorced. Many people believe that, and that's not true and never has been. Obviously, the church would like to follow the teaching of Christ, which is what God has joined together, let no one put asunder, so that the ideal is that a marriage is permanent. But we know that we don't always reach the ideal. There are many other teachings of Christianity that we don't reach. That Christ teaches, the Ten Commandments teach, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie, etc., and yet we do. So we often miss the mark. So many couples who begin marriage, I would presume with the idea of permanence of marriage, find out that for whatever reason, the marriage needs to be dissolved. And so we recognize that as a reality. A person who is divorced and single and is not remarried can continue to be active in the Catholic Church, receive all the sacraments. There's no change in their status whatsoever. If a person remarries without the church's blessing, I'll explain how that can happen, then we say they are still a member of the church, but they should not receive communion, because communion is a symbol, not only the body and blood of Christ, but of complete unity with the church. So the church would say if a person marries after divorce, we don't recognize that as a sacramental marriage. To remedy that situation, the church has an annulment procedure in which the Catholic Church goes into a marriage that is ended in divorce and looks for reasons within the church's teaching that would dissolve that marriage and then free the person to marry again in the Catholic Church. The annulment procedure is a little bit more complicated than civil divorce, but that's the case for many things. It's civil law oftentimes is much more lax or liberal than church law. For example, In the state of Nevada, at least in 15 of our counties, prostitution is legal. The Catholic Church would not teach that's a moral lifestyle. As we know in this country, abortion is legal, and the Catholic Church does not believe in that. So because something is civilly allowed, like divorce, the Catholic Church is a little more reluctant to go along with that. But we do have our own system of annulment, whereby a previous marriage in the church can be dissolved, the person can marry again and be in full standing.
Thank you very much. Joel, who was the Buddha, and how was the format of the religion developed in 1 minute?
What was the last part?
And how is the format of the religion developed? Maybe you can just...
The Buddha his name was Gautama Siddhartha. He was known as Shakyamuni because the name of his tribe was the Shakya tribe, and he was the prince of that tribe. Approximately 2,500 years ago was when he lived, and he taught for 40 years. And the last 8 years of his life, he taught the Lotus Sutra, which was the sutra that reversed everything he had taught before that, stating that that was just getting people prepared to accept the truth. And then the Lotus Sutra was his highest teaching. And as Nichiren Buddhists, we practice the Lotus Sutra, the highest teaching. And the Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is actually the title of that sutra. And how was the practice? Is that what it was? How was the practice formulated?
How was the format of the religion developed?
Format of the religion.
I think that means more like practice.
The practice, it used to be in early Buddhism, Hinayana, it's called Hinayana, the earlier part of Shakyamuni's life. He taught that you had to eliminate desires because desires cause suffering, and if you wanted to eliminate suffering, you had to get rid of all of the cause of your suffering, which was desires. But, you know, we have desire for food and oxygen and water and housing, and without all of that, you can't live. So he reversed all of that, and in the Lotus Sutra, you are able to take your sufferings and your desires, and that causes your happiness, actually. So the Lotus Sutra is 28 chapters long, and originally you had to read the entire sutra every day, which took way too much time. So Nichiren in the 1200s, the founder of this sect of Buddhism, after studying as many of the teachings that he could, he realized that if you just say the title, it's equivalent to reading the entire sutra. So the main practice of that we do is just chanting the title, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, and we also recite a chapter and a half of the Lotus Sutra, and we do this in the morning and the evening. We do it every day, twice a day.
Thank you. Teji, I'm Teji right now. Teji, can anyone become a Sikh, or does one have to be born into the religion?
Very good question. One is never born a Sikh, one becomes one. So your works, your good deeds define you, what you are. As I said, Sikh is just a learner, a seeker, a student. Aren't we all the same? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this last question will start with Cyndi, and you get the option to either make a comment that you feel like you would like to wrap up with if you hadn't had a chance to say something that you'd wished, or you can answer the question, what about your faith most transformed you? What practice? Or clarifying comment.
Only one. I believe that for myself, the practice of affirmative prayer, learning how to pray effectively, was the most transformative practice in my life. 25 years ago, when the doctors told me I'd be paralyzed in 2 years, I knew I needed to do something different. And as a student of religious science, I started praying affirmatively, knowing the truth of my healthy body. So, in a sense, I am, the walking demonstration of my faith. And the fact that we teach cause and effect, as has been mentioned by the Buddhists, what you believe is your truth, and as Jesus told us, that all of this and greater can you do. So that as we begin to aspire to a greater spiritual awakening and awareness, we reach what we believe to be the Christhood that was not unique to the person of Jesus, but was rather the spiritual awakening and development manifest through him and is available to each person in their own spiritual path.
Thank you, Cyndi. Bill, either a clarifying comment or what was the most transformative element of your faith?
I believe the most transformative element of my faith, my Catholic Christian faith, is the challenge to be Christ-like and to see Christ in others. The homily I gave this morning at Mass was based on the parable of the wedding garment, that in the parable one was kicked out of the wedding because they weren't wearing the proper garment, and I believe the deeper meaning of that is that we must, as Paul writes, we must put on Christ. And so that's a constant challenge to me to be more Christ-like day by day, year by year, but also to see the Christ in every person. Just as an aside, I'm a great fan of Broadway musicals, and my favorite musical is Les Mis. And my favorite line is, "To love another person is to see the face of God." And I try to see the face of God in every person whom I love and who loves me, or whom I should love, to see God's face there.
Thank you very much.
The most transformative part of this practice for me was I believed up until I was 30 years old that you can do anything you want and everything's still going to work out. And it didn't. And I found myself homeless, and my wife had left me, and jobless. It was pretty bad. And I ran into this, I met this practice, and I immediately started chanting with no concept of how to transform my life. I just knew that it needed to be better. But through practicing, through studying, through associating with people that were practitioners, I realized that I'm responsible, and I have to make positive causes, and that based on cause and effect, if I make positive causes, there's no way that my future can turn out any way but positive. So I was able to transform the way that I think into creating positive events in my life, and I've created a life that I can't even believe is me from that time. And that is, the greatest thing is that I am the Buddha and everybody else is. I have a tendency to see the negative in other people and assume that that's who they are. But really at the core, we are all tremendous beings. We're just been deluded by all of the minutia in the world that we live. So I was able to transform the way that I view life and other humans to see the true beauty in everyone.
Thank you. Teji.
Well, as the old saying goes, if you can't see God in all, you can't see God at all. So, if one breeds goodness within and shares that with somebody else, that is the whole idea of being a human being. That is the whole goal of us being here on this world. We don't know what happened before that. We'll never know what's going to happen after that. Yes, I say I do not know. But what I know is if I do something positive today, it will have a positive effect. We are little pearls in a necklace. If I do good to somebody, I don't want that goodness back to me. That goodness should be transferred to somebody else. We are all pearls in the necklace of goodness, where let's not ask anything in return, but let's try to give what we have within.
Thank you. And Jane, you get the last word tonight.
The joy I find in my religion has to do with being part of a spiritual smorgasbord, where every day I get gently pushed and sometimes pulled into appreciating and learning from others, and being in the same room with people that are atheists and theists and mystics and Christians, and learning so many deep things from them, and that our differences are so small compared to our similarities. It's something to laugh with joy.
Thank you very much. And on that note, you get your chance to applaud one more time.